Hey everyone, welcome to my session on Notes from the Field and Storage Spaces Direct. My name is Dave Kawula. I'm a Microsoft MVP, Veeam Vanguard, Nutanix Technology Champion, and I work with TriCon Elite Consulting. We're based out of Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and we specialize in deploying hyper-converged infrastructure, and specifically our focus lately has been on Storage Spaces Direct. So I hope you enjoy my session. This is an updated session from the one that I did at Microsoft's Ignite conference in September of 2017. So hopefully you enjoy the content and sit back and get ready for a cool show. So let's see what we're in for here. So a little bit of information on myself, some contact details. So you can get me at Dave Kawula on Twitter. I blog at checkyourlogs.net. If you have any email questions for me, you can get me at dkawula@triconelite.com. And you want to follow two Twitter hashtags, MVP Hour and Storage Spaces Direct. That is typically where you will find me online. Okay, so let's see what we're going to go through in the next half-hour jam-packed session. We're going to go through a brief introduction of what is Storage Spaces Direct and kind of Microsoft's hyper-converged infrastructure. Then we're going to jump right into the good stuff for you, which is all of the awesome notes from the field. We'll talk about some cool third-party add-ons like some monitoring and some reporting solutions. And then we'll get to the big question is, what happened to Storage Spaces Direct in Windows Server 1709 and what we can expect in Windows Server 1803, the next release that's going to be coming up. Okay, so what exactly is Storage Spaces Direct? Well, Storage Spaces Direct is Microsoft's hyper-converged infrastructure platform. So what do you need to get started with this? Well, the first thing that you need is you just need some commodity servers, some industry standard servers with some internal drives. So this could be SAS, SATA, or NVMe based drives. There's some new ones that are supported like NVDIMM drives, which are kind of the newer technology, but the ones that I primarily work with are the SSD and the NVMe style drives. So picture yourself having some HP DL380s or some Dell R730 or 740XD servers, the nice little 2U chassis with a bunch of drives that can be presented. Get yourself a pass-through HBA inside of there so that you can take and that you can talk to those drives, and you're good to go. So these are just standard regular old servers. The cool thing is that Dell and HP and other vendors have SKUs for Storage Spaces Direct right now. So they take a lot of the guesswork out of these builds. But basically, they're just commodity boxes, just things that you would normally see in your data center. We take those servers, we install a few roles on them. So we're going to install Hyper-V, we're going to install failover clustering, and we're going to install a feature called data center bridging, which is used for our RDMA or RDMA over converged Ethernet configurations. So very simple build out. Typically takes less than a few hours to get these things prepped and provisioned and ready to go for Storage Spaces Direct. Once we cluster them, inside of failover clustering, there's actually a node in there for storage where we can set up a storage pool. So we will enable that by running a command called enable cluster S2D. Once that's done, we take those drives that were on the individual servers and we're going to create a pool of storage. And that pool of storage can be carved up and then presented back to the individual nodes in the form of volumes. The storage pool can have different settings in there for cache types, resiliency, different columns, and the best part about this is all of that is configured for you out of the box. You don't have to do anything. You just have to run one line of PowerShell and you're good to go. So after we get that pool created, we can present that out into cluster shared volumes. So that's what you'd see in C drive cluster storage and all your different volumes. Those can be presented back to the nodes. And then we can start, building VMs on top of this. These volumes have built-in resiliency. So in the event of a node failure, so let's take the example that we have a three-way mirror configuration right now. We can actually drop a drive or a couple drives, and we can lose an entire node and we can still stay online and available. So that's pretty cool. And that's all built right into the subsystem. Storage Spaces Direct is actually not a role or a feature in Windows. and is not something you download. It's actually built right into the kernel of Windows Server. So that's pretty cool. So it's extremely fast, resilient, and robust. And we're seeing great results out in the field right now. It's been around and running now for a couple years. So, you know, this is a good configuration. Okay, let's get to the meat and potatoes. One of the big problems that we saw with hyper-converged infrastructure in its infancy was a lack of standards, a lack of designs. And this caused a lot of problems for the support organizations that had to look after these solutions. So what Microsoft has done, and they've worked with the individual vendors, is to build something called the Windows Server Software-Defined Program, or the WSSD. And what this means is that before a vendor is allowed to release and have certified drivers for Storage Spaces Direct and that hyper-converged infrastructure, it actually has to go through rigorous testing with Microsoft to make sure that it's certified and approved. And more importantly, if a vendor wants to go to market with one of these solutions, they actually have to go through a full burn-in stress test at Microsoft to make sure that this is all working properly and as expected. So, you know, if you're going to have blue screens or, you know, bug checks or driver issues or anything like that, let's find them before we've got a bunch of these systems running out in the wild, giving the end users and consumers of the technology a really bad experience. So this is good, and this is what all the vendors are complying with now. You know, Dell, HP, Lenovo, all those vendors, the mainstream vendors that are out there, are conforming with this. Speaking of those vendor certified solutions, one of my personal favorites that's out there right now is the Dell EMC Ready configurations for Storage Spaces Direct. I've personally had a chance to work through this exact configuration off of this architecture that's published from Dell. So whenever you start a project, one of the biggest problems is getting your conceptual designs, your solution blueprints done, your reference architectures, your build guides. All of that stuff needs to be done in order to move forward with an enterprise level project. Dell has done this for you. HP's done this for you. Lenovo's done this for you. All of these vendors have to publish this in order to be part of that program with Microsoft. In my personal opinion, I think Dell right now has probably done one of the best jobs of putting this together, and I encourage you to go download it. So it's called the Storage Spaces Direct Dell EMC Ready configurations, and the link is there for you to download this. Highly recommend you checking this out. Okay, some of the other vendor solutions that are out there. Mellanox technology is a big part of the Storage Spaces Direct networking ecosystem. And one of the things that I know I've struggled with in previous deployments was taking and having all of my networking configurations set forth out of the gate. And what do I need to do from a top-of-rack switch configuration to NIC configurations, all the little settings that are required to make all these things work. Mellanox done a great job as well. They have a published reference architecture for Storage Spaces Direct. Theirs also includes top-of-rack switch configurations, and the Mellanox CX3 and CX4 series are probably the most predominant cards that we see in the market used for Storage Spaces Direct because they fully support RDMA and RDMA over converged Ethernet. Now, there's other cards and other vendors that are out there that are providing solutions via iWarp. And you know, the difference between having an RDMA over converged Ethernet solution, or RoCE, versus iWarp is iWarp doesn't require any switch configurations. All the configurations happen NIC side, whereas these configurations from Mellanox and the vendors that do RDMA over converged Ethernet actually require you to configure your NICs properly in the Windows subsystem, as well as the backend switches. So there's a two-part config. Now, personally, I don't find it a big deal configuring the top-of-rack switches because I've done it enough and worked with enough of the different vendors that we have most of the switch configurations figured out. But for a lot of people that are out there that just want to get this up and running and working quickly, iWarp might be a good option. And we're starting to hear that that's becoming a bigger recommendation from even Microsoft, because less support calls for them because things just work out of the box. But I got to tell you, I've seen some pretty incredible results coming from Mellanox and their series of NICs and switches. And we fully back them, and we put them in most of our designs. And they have some great reference documentation, and you can download it from the link there. Okay, what if you want to set up storage spaces direct in your own lab? You know, what if you want to just do a DIY solution? You have some real commodity nodes like Supermicro, and you want to just build this out. Well, we've actually written a book based on that exact scenario. Our book is called Master Storage Spaces Direct Volume 1. I had some amazing authors work on this with me, like Crystal, Thomas Rayner, Alan Rayfuse. We had Emil Cabot. We had Carrie Sun. We had so many amazing MVPs, CCIEs, industry experts that were out there that helped us with this particular solution and this book that has become an amazing success. And the good news for you is we're actually very close to having enough content to go for our volume 2 of this book. We'll have some updated reference architectures in there. We've done way more builds out in the field, and we have a better feel and understanding of, you know, what this is going to look like. When we published this book, it was January of 2017, and Storage Spaces Direct actually was only in RTM availability for 2 to 3 months before that. So now we're rolling around on a 15, 18-month cycle, and we're starting to see a lot more data coming back from the field. But, you know, support us. Go ahead and pick up a copy of the book. You can just search for it on Amazon. It's a great read. We've got a Kindle version as well as a print version, and we actually use this as a baseline for any of our projects getting started. Now, what if you wanted to just build a virtual lab of Storage Spaces Direct? Well, you have 2 to 3 different options here. Number one, the solution that I will use with a lot of our customers is what I call my big demo script. This is a hybrid script that I've been working on for probably the last 18 months or so. And it's a hybrid of a script that actually came from our kind of godfather of virtualization at Microsoft, Ben Armstrong. And so he's actually the principal program lead at Microsoft for the virtualization stack. And he built this amazing demo that would stand up your domain controllers, your Hyper-V nodes, a bunch of container hosts and stuff like that. And what I've done is I've customized that into a 8-node Storage Spaces Direct build that will run on your laptop. So if you have a laptop with 16 or 32 gigs of RAM, you can actually stand this up. Now, in my testing for this, I came across this amazing GitHub repo that was actually being supported by some guys from Microsoft Premier Support. And so it's their own private repo, but it's one that they actually use with a lot of their customers. And they have a ton of scenarios in there for different builds. Theirs is a little different, still using PowerShell, but they're using a lot more PowerShell DSC for their builds. And at the end of either of these two solutions, you can just run the scripts and you'll be able to stand up your very own hyper-converged infrastructure running on a Hyper-V host in less than an hour. Both solutions deploy in less than an hour. And if you're working with Azure, there's actually Storage Spaces Direct ARM templates that you can just run, and they work. I've tested all 3 scenarios. All 3 work beautifully, and they're available for you, and all of them are free of charge, save the Azure one because you've got to pay for a little bit of the compute resources. Okay, so before we get into the actual notes from the field, let's take a really quick moment to chat about the secret sauce of what really makes your hyper-converged infrastructure run well. And that is your host channel adapter, or your HCA. Your HCA is going to be typically in a Storage Spaces Direct configuration, if we're talking about the Dell EMC Ready, a CX3 Pro or a CX4 in their new designs. And those cards actually support something called RDMA, or Remote Direct Memory Access. And when we run that over an Ethernet network, we actually call it RDMA over Converged Ethernet, or RoCE. And this is basically an offload technology where when we send packets across the wire, they're going to go through a switch and out to another switch port and out to the other adapter. With the offload technology, the switches actually don't see much of that traffic. It actually gets offloaded from card to card. Think of each card as having their own central processing unit on CPU, and that is going to do the work for you. So you completely bypass the local CPU on the host machines. Now this is very important because if you run Storage Spaces Direct in a non-RDMA configuration, you see a massive hit and massive spike on the local CPU. So you really need RDMA in order to make this work properly. The cool thing is even in this design that we show in the graphic, let's envision that there's no switches involved. You can actually get a direct connect 2-node Storage Spaces Direct configuration working with RDMA. So that is pretty cool and something you definitely need to make sure that you spend some time looking into. There's only one place on the internet that I found that has really, really good training on RDMA, and that's actually at the Mellanox University. So you can register yourself for some free courses or go through their paid courses, and you can get a really deep dive into this side of the networking stack. And I'd highly recommend that to kind of further your knowledge and education around this, especially if you're serious about building these Storage Spaces Direct Hyper Converged nodes. Well worth your money. I've gone through it, and it was very, very good. Okay, so now that we kind of have a baseline foundation of what Storage Spaces Direct is, some of the building blocks, some of the things that we can do with it, ways to build labs, some books, things like that, who's ready for the good stuff? The actual notes from the field. Well, I am. Let's get started. Okay, the first one. If you're using RDMA Rocky configurations, then configure data center bridging. Data center bridging are the settings that are going to be on your switches as well as in Windows. There's actually a role called data center bridging that needs to be configured and set up properly. If you're not using it, don't enable it. There's issues. So if you're going to do a non-RDMA configuration of Storage Spaces Direct, please skip all of those data center bridging steps. All right, the next one. Can you configure 2 nodes for an SMB configuration? So for example, I've been recently working with a smaller law firm, and we set up 2 HPE DL380 Gen 9 servers for them. Loaded them up with a bunch of solid state disk, and we configured those for them, and we actually set it up in a direct connect, and this was great. They're just a small firm and really cut down the cost of any 10 gig infrastructure, although the switches have really come down in price. So you can do it, but there is a little catch to this. You just need to make sure that you're not running on the default native VLAN 1. You need to make sure that you configure your VLANs appropriately. All right, so make sure that on your storage adapters, virtual adapters, you still set VLANs on them, because RDMA requires that you actually have a VLAN set. Otherwise, it does not work. Okay, the next one here is stick with your supported and tested drivers and firmware versions. Why? Well, remember how we talked a little bit earlier about the Windows Server software-defined program and how Microsoft has rigorously tested driver versions and firmware versions in their labs and working with the vendors to make sure that you have a vetted solution? Well, those vendors publish all of those drivers that have been tested. Don't start going out in the wild and deploying the latest and greatest firmware until you have approval from the vendors that they have also tested it, because if not, there's a good chance you're going to have to roll back those firmware, and you don't want to be patient zero. Now, if you do want to be patient zero and you want to test all this stuff out for me, feel free, because you know what saves me a lot of pain in the field. You can join our Slack channel for Storage Spaces Direct, and you're more than welcome to post all those issues you have. For me, I take a little bit more of a safer position, and I normally wait a little while before I ever apply. All right. Now, one of the big issues with Storage Spaces Direct that we've seen over the last 12 months is storage jobs failing or stalling out, and what are some of the causes for those storage jobs failing out, and how can you quickly give them a bump to get them going? Well, depending on what update level you're on, because Microsoft releases all of the cumulative updates for Windows Server 2016 on a monthly basis. And oh, by the way, I didn't put this in the slide decks. All the fixes for Storage Spaces Direct come out there monthly as well. So if there are issues that are happening, when you build this, make sure that you fully patch your systems, because if you don't, you're probably going to be having issues. So make sure you stay on top of your patches as well, because that's where a lot of the updates roll in. So with the Storage Spaces Direct configurations that we were seeing around, I think it was August of this year, before a bunch of updates had come out, if your storage jobs were failing, one of the little tricks to get around that was to change the CSV ownership. So that would be going into the storage node and failover clustering and right-clicking and changing the owner on the CSV, the cluster shared volume. And that seemed to bump those jobs and get them going. This has since been fixed in later cumulative updates, but I always keep that in my back pocket just in case things seem to get stalled out. So if your jobs are failing or stalling, that could potentially be a reason why. All right. The next one, we actually just saw this about a week and a half ago with one of our customers. They had taken a CSV offline. They were in the process of transitioning from an older cluster shared volume that had had some data corruption issues in it. So we had moved all of the data off, and we wanted to take and we set up a new cluster shared volume. We storage live migrated all the VMs off, and we were going to decommission it. But we left the old volume around just for an extended period of time because, you know, we wanted to keep it there just in case. Now, I left it online. The customer decided to take that volume offline to ensure that no data had been stored there, and inadvertently didn't realize that the storage jobs get stalled if one of those volumes is offline, because what happened is they went and rebooted one of their nodes in a 7-node cluster, and this actually stalled out the storage jobs. So make sure that you take and you keep all those cluster shared volumes online. Don't manually offline them and then reboot nodes, because this will stall out some of your storage jobs that are running, trying to rebalance and restripe that data across all of the hyper-converged infrastructure. So that was kind of an odd little issue that we had, and it kind of put one of the volumes in a degraded capacity, and it was an easy fix, but I just never seen that before. So that's kind of a good one to note. So if you've got old CSVs kicking around, don't offline them, just get rid of them, and if you're going to keep them around, leave them online. All right, this is one of my favorite ones. Customers ask me all the time about using non-certified hardware for Storage Spaces Direct. For example, let's say that they don't have the proper host bus adapter or HBA in order to take and support Storage Spaces Direct. So for example, there's certain models like the controllers for HP and Dell that are actually certified and will support this, but the built-in controllers were never really designed. You're not supposed to run RAID and then have software network RAID, which would be Storage Spaces Direct riding on top of it on a RAID configuration. So the bus types that are supported are SAS, SATA, NVMe. It's not supported for iSCSI. It's not supported for RAID. It's not supported for other types. So how do you get this working in your lab on just generic hardware you have, or older hardware, just because you want to see what this works in and works like in a non-virtualized capacity? Well, before you run enable cluster S2D to form your Storage Spaces Direct pool of storage, you can take and run this command. You can either run get cluster S2D bus types 0x100 to enable the RAID bus types, or you can run the other one, which is 429.496.7295, and that will enable all bus types, and that will allow the Storage Spaces Direct cluster to be formed even on non-certified hardware. Please understand this is fully not supported by Microsoft and is only for a test and lab scenario. It's not widely published by Microsoft that you can even do this, but you can turn those on and things will work for you. All right, the next one. Who likes as-built documentation, and who likes to not have to write said as-built documentation? Well, I'm putting my hand up right now, even although you can't see it, And where can we get such said scripts that will do that for us? Well, we've got a MVP, Remain Siri, who has taken and built out an amazing little script for us. And let me actually just take you over there and show you this now. So let's just go over to our audit reports for you. And so this is one of those said little reports that we have. And so this one here is called the S2D audit report. I'll show you where the GitHub repo is in a sec. But basically you just run this against your storage spaces direct farm and it spits out a pretty little report for you. Well, okay, that looks good. I get some cluster and node information. I've seen stuff like that before. But how about all of your network information? All of your networks, all your VLANs that you have that you're using, all of the adapters like the Mellanox CX3s, seeing if you have jumbo frames enabled on there. Okay, that's starting to look pretty good. How about all your virtual switches that are configured inside of the farm? Yeah, that's looking pretty good too. So we'll just roll through this. This is a 4-node configuration, so all the networking configuration against 4 nodes. How about all the storage and percentage of free space reports you've got on all of your individual local host servers? That's pretty good. Then your cluster shared volumes, making sure that everything is good. You're not in maintenance mode, making sure that your percentage of free space is looking good inside of there. How about all of your cluster network information that you're running? Yep, that's good. Host to OS information, see if your hot fixes are installed, see if you're at the minimal interface with server core. Other things inside of here, cluster information, seeing if you've got your CSV block cache set. So we can see in this example that we don't have the CSV block cache set. And then information pertaining to all the virtual machines. So this one here had about 100 VMs running inside of this particular farm. And then you get into all the storage spaces direct info. So this particular cluster had 69.83 terabytes of available size, all flash SSD drives. We had 60 terabytes available and 9 terabytes free. Spread across all of our nodes, we were running 3-way mirroring. These were the size of the volumes. This was the footprint on the pool that was being used. And then if you take a look, here's all of our drives. So we were using 1.46 terabytes enterprise HP drives. We can see the firmware revisions on there. And these were all the drives in the pool. Then all of our SMB and multi-channel configurations that we've got as part of this as well. So we can make sure that RDMA is working. And this is one of the best scripts that I've seen that's out there so far. So that's one of them. So I think that's pretty cool. Hope you guys enjoy that one. Oh, sorry, I was going to show you where to get that from. So this is just on a GitHub repo, and you could just get it by taking and searching right here. So that one is available for you. All right, up next. How about Storage Spaces Direct community? So we actually have a very vibrant Storage Spaces Direct community. A bunch of Microsoft MVPs started a Slack channel. So if you want to join us on Slack, you can just join us by going to http://slack.storagespacesdirect.com, request membership, and this will bring you in. The web page looks just like this. If you've never used Slack, it's just like I say about Twitter. If you're not on Twitter, get on Twitter. And there are, I think, over 10,000 messages, multiple channels inside of here. I can just actually show you what this looks like right away right here. I can pull up some of the Slack channels here, and we can just take and go up. So here's a support channel, for example, and all the issues and everything else that are going on. And this is all current, and we can see that, you know, Daryl's saying who has HP Gen 9s with Mellanox CX3s and is willing to let me Wireshark his system. So, you know, it's pretty cool because this is just guys like you and me that are out there. We can see you got performance results, news. These are all the different channels. You're not going to find a better community out there than this one here because we can get you the answers right away. All right. So if you're interested in this, sure as heck better join up on that. All right. The next one is a cool little S2D reporting solution from Starlin Software called Starlin Manager. This one here gives you an awesome little dashboard type view, similar to the reporting script, the S2D Audit. the PowerShell script. This one here actually just gives it to you in a nice little UI that you can display on your monitors in your NOC. This tool is 100% free from Starlin Software, called Starlin Manager. So I really like that one. And the next one is there's a testing tool called VM Fleet, and inside of there's a script called watchcluster.ps1. Watchcluster.ps1 can be modified so that we can take and we can change the sets value inside of there to include everything. By default, this is what you see. I can see I was testing off of a 2-node configuration here where I was getting about 500,000 I/O. And this is what the configuration looks like once I've taken and I've tweaked that value. Now, since me making this PowerPoint, you don't actually have to tweak the PowerShell file anymore. You can actually just hit it by changing the sets property with watch-cluster, but you can still get the same results. So make sure that you're doing that, because then you can actually see all the information that you need. All right, how about an email alerting solution if something is going wrong? Well, Charbel Nemnon, his fellow Hyper-V and Microsoft MVP, has come up with a really cool little solution called Monitor S2D. And let's go take a look and see what that looks like. So here's a blog post that he's got on it. And so basically what you can do is you can hook into the cluster health monitoring services. So to do that, you can just run get storage subsystem cluster debug storage subsystem. And if there's errors inside of storage spaces direct or cluster, it'll actually show up in here. Now what he's done is he's hooked a little script around that and built a reporting interface that will email you in the event that something pops into there, which is really, really cool, because now you have email alerting. Let's say somebody unplugs a cable, let's say a node reboots, let's say that there's something going wrong. Now you can actually have email alerting. So we'll call this poor man's email alerting in the event that you don't have something like System Center, Operations Manager, or another monitoring solution for this. So here's the link. The link is also in the PowerPoint deck, which you can get from me, and I think that's pretty cool. His GitHub repo is right here, so that's another kind of good little tidbit of information for you guys. Now the last one is, what if you want to factory reset your storage spaces direct nodes, like start over with your lab configurations in a similar way that I do. I do a lot of these demos all the time, and I don't want to rebuild my nodes. I just want to tear down the cluster, and I want to show people how to enable it again, wipe the disks, and just start over and over again. Well, the script that I like to use for that is called clear SDS config. So clear-SDS config. If you look at that up, completely clearing an existing storage spaces configuration. Here's my precursor warning to this. Do not run this in production. You will delete all the data on those disks. You only use this to reset your lab configuration, or if you had to reset a production configuration, it will tear out the cluster, it will destroy the pool, you will lose all of your data, but this will allow you to just very, very quickly just start over from scratch, clearing all the disk configurations. I have used this a lot, and it works really well. I've used that as recently as about a week ago on a configuration, and it works great. All right, now the elephant in the room. Where exactly did Storage Spaces Direct go? Because it isn't in Windows Server 1709, the latest release that Microsoft had that they announced at their Microsoft Ignite conference in September of this past year. Yes, Storage Spaces Direct was removed from that build. Is Storage Spaces Direct gone? No, it absolutely is not gone. There's active development work that's going on right now. You are going to see it coming back in Windows Server 1803, the next release that's going to be coming out. Internally, Microsoft had their own reasons for pulling it. We're still doing a ton of production deployments today that are just on regular old Windows Server. But you cannot directly upgrade to 1709. There's a lot of feature enhancements that have moved into this, and we're still getting a lot of value. So you can't run it in 1709. It'll be back in 1803. Things like REFS dedupe are going to be there, including a lot of additional features, which are going to be really, really cool. All right, so 1803, we're only a couple months away for the next version of Storage Spaces Direct being readily available for us. And with that, I have to say thank you very much. I'm a few minutes overtime here for these quick hitter sessions. Hopefully you really enjoyed this. Hopefully you got a ton of value and you enjoyed this type of format and session delivery. From all of us at the MVP Days crew, we thank you for coming out to another one of our virtual conferences, and we really hope to see you at another live event soon.